Got it. Perfect. Thanks, Annie. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really love hosting these office hours because it's just so awesome to be able to kind of connect one-on-one with you guys and see your faces. So we really appreciate you coming today. My name is Serena, and I'm a programs coordinator at Daily Axe. And I'm here today with Annie, who's a senior programs coordinator at Daily Axe. And we are your resident sheet mulching experts. We've got a couple of years of sheet mulching under our belt, so we're really excited to answer all your questions about that today. So just out of curiosity, how many of you guys have heard of Daily Axe before? Have all of you? Jeanette has. Chuck, no.
I have.
You have, perfect. Okay, well, Chuck, this is gonna be for you. So Daily Axe is a holistic education nonprofit that takes a heart-centered approach to inspiring transformative action to create more connected, equitable, and climate-resilient communities. We believe in the power of our actions to reconnect people to self, community, and place, which in turn helps heal our society and our planet. Now you might be wondering, what does that actually mean? What does Daily Axe really do? So our holistic approach to addressing this, the climate crisis really starts in the soil and swells into culture and policy change. We have sustainability programs, which historically focused on landscape transformation starting back in 2009, sheet mulching thirsty lawns and the water-wise gardens, and is a lot of what Annie and I do out in the field. We have programs that give people the skills, tools, and resources to reduce their environmental footprint. We also believe that change happens through collaboration. So we invest in strengthening community leadership. We do this through our Leadership Institute for Just and Resilient Communities, which is a 10-month-long program that trains leaders to step up to the many challenges that our community faces today. We also have the Environmental Health Network that provides education and resources to our frontline agricultural workers in their communities here in Sonoma County. And just this last year, we adopted the Eco to School program that inspires youth to take immediate climate action. We foster networks and alliances with all the amazing community and government programs here in Sonoma County and beyond. And we also try to inspire and ignite change through our action campaigns that we host almost every single year since around 2009, I believe, as well. So, and then we do all of this through personal ecology because we believe that transforming the world really begins with transforming yourself. So just a really quick few things today before we dive in about Zoom. So we made this a meeting instead of a webinar because we're really excited to see your guys' faces and have more of a casual conversation with you today. You can expect this presentation to be about 15 to 20 minutes long. We try to keep it pretty short, just enough to give you guys some material to ask us questions about afterwards. If a question arises during the presentation, just go ahead and type it into the chat. And if it's really relevant to what Annie is presenting in the moment, I'll interrupt Annie and make sure she answers it before we move on to the next subject. But if not, we'll make sure to cover everything because we have plenty of time to do so afterwards. Also, you might have already noticed, but we are currently recording this meeting. So if any of you are uncomfortable with being recorded or don't want this to be posted on our website and on YouTube, just send me a message and we're perfectly happy to not post the recording afterwards.
Right.
And now I'm going to pass it off to Annie to talk about sheet mulching.
Sheet mulching is one of my favorite topics. I am a sheet mulching enthusiast, and Daily Axe has done many different sheet mulching projects in various different terrains. So we'll have plenty of knowledge to draw from to answer your questions. We're going to go over the benefits of sheet mulching and then talk about the sheet mulching process, as well as touch on Petaluma's Mulch Madness Program. And then we'll have plenty of time for those questions that you might have for us. Before we dive into the content, Daily Axe always likes to start with a quote, and this one is one of my favorites. It's never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has, by Margaret Mead. And you all are changing the world one landscape at a time. So let's dive into it. Sheet mulching benefits. So you can sheet mulch in a variety of different terrains. It does not have to be a lawn, but we'll focus on sheet mulching a lawn right now. And the process of sheet mulching allows you to compost your lawn in place. When you have a lawn and you're looking at transitioning to a lower water use landscape, you have two options. One is to actually physically dig up and remove that turf. And then the other is to allow it to compost in place, which improves your soil quality and is a lot less work than digging it up, removing topsoil, and creating a lot of green waste. In addition to improving your soil quality, the process of sheet mulching from a higher water use landscape, or transitioning from a higher water use landscape to a lower water use landscape using sheet mulching techniques saves a lot of water and ends up saving you a lot of money as well. So just for an example, a low water use landscape uses about 80% less water than turf. So that over the time is a lot of resources that you're saving. And it provides you with a beautiful blank slate for the garden of your dreams.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention too, I don't know if any of you saw it, but yesterday the Press Democrat came out with an article about our reservoirs being the lowest that they've been since they were installed right now. So I think, this year is definitely a dry year. And I think any actions that we can take to save water, especially since, household landscapes, about 50% of household water goes towards our landscape, right? So any way that we can save water this year is going to be extra important.
Thanks, Serena. And you could have a landscape that looks like this. These landscapes transitioning from turf to a beautiful habitat providing low water use landscape really adds pops of color, diversity of plants, and a lot of beauty to your neighborhood. So the first step to sheet mulching is creating a trench that's about a foot wide and at a 45-degree angle to create this gentle slope that the cardboard is going to roll into. You'll do this along the entire perimeter of the landscape that you're looking to sheet mulch. And this provides a nice angle for the cardboard to roll into so that it doesn't perforate. Your goal when you're spreading cardboard is to keep it in one piece so that you don't have little breaks, which are opportunities for weeds to grow into. And then you have this nice little trench that the cardboard can roll into, and then it provides an area for your mulch to cover it up and secure it in place. And an added benefit to creating a nice trench at the perimeters of your landscape, we've noticed over time that weed intrusion usually is heaviest along the perimeters. And that's because it's closest to other people's landscapes or the street where you might have weed seeds blowing in. And you always get those pesky dandelions with their really deep roots right at the border of your landscape where they can be hard to dig out. But when you're trenching like this, you're really making sure that you're removing any existing roots that could be a weed problem in the future and creating a nice bed of mulch that will make it easier for you to maintain your mulched landscape over time. So once you have trenched, or what we call edging, once you've created that perimeter throughout your landscape, then it's time to spread 1 inch of compost on top of your lawn or landscape. And this helps compost your lawn in place, as well as provide nutrients to existing microbacteria in the soil that will get that. It'll just get the lawn composting and get all of the bacteria in the soil activated to start that decomposition process and create a nice spongy, receptive soil bed for whatever plants that you will be adding to your landscape. All right, now you're going to cover your landscape with 2 layers of cardboard. And the picture on the left here is from a sheet mulching project that we did at Strauss Creamery at their headquarters in Petaluma, where we sheet mulched 14,000 square feet of lawn with over 80 volunteers. And you can see that that's actually really fun. You have these big rolls of cardboard that you're just pushing out. We always use 2 layers because 2 layers will help prevent weeds from growing through them. And cardboard is a source of carbon. And so you have your lawn, which is nitrogen, you're layering cardboard or carbon on top, and you're creating the perfect recipe for decomposition to happen to feed all of the microorganisms in the soil and really help improve your soil quality, which then everything starts with soil, really. So if we have really, really healthy soil, we'll have really healthy plants. And the healthier plants that we have, they're going to have fewer issues and fewer maintenance needs over time. So we're really trying to build that healthy soil to get ready for our plants, and sheet mulching aids in that process.
Yeah, and you'll notice that these rolls are really great for like a landscape that is more of a blank canvas, as in like you're just going over some existing turf lawn. But if you have a lot of existing plants on your landscape, we've actually found it's easier to use recycled cardboard boxes, because then you could kind of like puzzle piece it all together and go around existing plants. You're not having to like, you know, maneuver these giant rolls over existing plants and cut holes out through the middle of it. We do recommend though that if you use recycled cardboard boxes, make sure you remove any like tape or labels that are on the boxes first.
Definitely. I have sheet mulched my yard over time using random pieces of cardboard and didn't take off all of the tape. I was just cutting corners, and I'm still digging up tape years later. So save yourself the time and energy and take off the tape the first time around. Also, these rolls of cardboard come in 3-foot rolls as well. What you're seeing here is a 6-foot roll, which can be kind of hard to maneuver, but if you're looking to get store-bought recycled cardboard, they come in smaller, more manageable rolls as well. All right, so spreading the mulch. We recommend using 3 inches of mulch, which creates a nice layer to prevent weed growth and also to keep your soil covered, which helps retain soil moisture. We usually use arbor mulch, and arbor mulch is basically all of the tree trimmings ground up. So it has some sticks and it has some leaves and it has some bigger chunks in it. It's not a uniform size, which creates a really natural look. And it's also already partially composted, which means it's going to break down a little bit faster into soil and be a benefit for your plants. But it also means, and this is the case with any type of mulch, that it will break down over time into soil, which is really great. But it means that you'll have to remulch every few years. So we spread that 3 inches of mulch out, and then you have your perfect blank slate to get yourself started. So this is really for Brian and Cheryl here who live in Petaluma. Petaluma has an amazing Mulch Madness program where they will provide you free cardboard, compost, mulch, and a sprinkler conversion kit. And this also includes the delivery cost, which can be over $90. You must have a lawn that's more than 500 square feet and that is currently watered. And the way it works is that you will go to their website, and we'll drop the link in the website in the chat after this, and we'll also send you the resources, all the resources that we've mentioned in this meeting in a follow-up email. So you go and you make an appointment, and then somebody will come out and qualify your lawn. And once it's been qualified, then they will tell you how many materials you need. They'll coordinate all of that with the provider, and then voila, you just have all of these resources that show up at your landscape or at your house, and you're ready to get started. You do need to complete your conversion within 1 year and then have a post inspection. And just as a reference of how wonderful of a program this is, if you have 1,000 square foot space that you're looking to sheet mulch, that means it's over $400 of resources, of goods that they're providing to you. So it's a huge, huge incentive that they're providing to transition a lawn to a lower water use landscape. And it's an amazing program. We highly recommend that if you qualify, or if you know anybody that lives in the city of Petaluma that's looking to transition their lawn to a low water use landscape, that you tell them about this program. And for those of you that are in Santa Rosa also has a cash for grass program as well, where they will provide you, I think it's, not even going to say the number, it's available on their website, but they will provide you with money per square foot of turf that you convert into a low water use landscape. So if you're really not Santa Rosa residents, there's some incentives for you as well.
Yeah, Annie, the Sonoma Water Saving Partnership actually has a page that lists out all the rebate programs for all the different Sonoma Marin towns and cities. So I just sent that to everybody.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. I'm going to pass it over to Serena to tell you about some of our upcoming events.
Yeah, thank you, Annie, for that awesome presentation on sheet mulching and all the different programs available. So just hang tight for a few more minutes, guys. I'm just going to tell you about a few upcoming events that you might want to plug into, and then we'll get chatting about mulching. So the first thing I wanted to let you guys know about, I spoke a little bit about our Leadership Institute for Just and Resilient Communities when I was introducing Daily Acts, but currently applications are open for our class of 2022. So this 10-month leadership program provides inspiration, skills, and support for people passionate about transformative change, and also like an incredible network of people who've been participating in the program for like almost 20 years now, I believe.
Yeah,
so,
anniversary.
Yeah, so if you'd like to learn more about the program, or if you know somebody who you think would be interested in the program, go ahead and send them over to dailyacts.org/leadership institute. Another upcoming event this is mostly Petaluma, but just good for any sort of pollution prevention practices. This applies anywhere. But recently, the City of Petaluma completed a much anticipated dredging project. But something was discovered once this dredging project was complete, and it was that there was about 10 years worth of trash in all of the dredging materials that volunteers actually had to go sift through and pick out before it could be used in the Petaluma marsh as anticipated. So we are working with the City of Petaluma to put together 2 different webinars, just teaching a little bit about actions you can take at home and in your landscape practices to prevent stormwater pollution and help keep our watersheds healthy.
And we wanted to tell you about the Mayor's Challenge the City of Petaluma is participating in April 1st through April 30th. And this is a fun opportunity to highlight all of the water-saving actions that people living in Petaluma are taking and elevate the City of Petaluma's commitment to supporting residents in their water-saving practices. You can go to www.mywaterpledge.com to take part in this nationwide challenge, where there's different areas where you can log your commitment to water saving, both indoor and outdoor, and it can help motivate you to adopt practices that you didn't know about or might not already be taking, and to really acknowledge for yourself the techniques that you are using. And it's a fun, friendly competition where you have the opportunity to win prizes for your water conservation actions.
And as always, we like to say a special thank you to our amazing sponsors who make our work possible. And with that being said, that's all we have for you guys today in terms of a presentation. So if you have any questions after this, feel free to jot down our email addresses, but we'll also be sending those to you in a follow-up email. And just to let you know, we're fueled by good vibes, but donations never hurt. So if you'd like to support our programs, we always appreciate donations at dailyacts.org/donate.
All right, so I'm going to stop the share and we'll dive into those individual questions. And does anybody have a question they want to throw to us to kick it off?
Hey, this is Brian. As I mentioned earlier, I live on the side of a hill and we don't really have a lawn, so that we're not going to be converting anything there. But if I were to try to do what we just learned, I was trying to figure out, how do you do it on a 45-degree hillside?
That is quite the slope. And one concern for sheet mulching when there is a slope is that mulch, like you mentioned before, can run off and can actually be stormwater pollution. And so in that situation, I don't know that I would recommend sheet mulching as the optimal way of keeping your ground covered, but there are a lot of other options available to you. And one of those options is cover cropping. And cover crops are a great way to stabilize soil. They sink their roots in and form a nice mat so that when the rain comes, the soil is actually held together by root mass. And it also is great during this dry summer months where that top layer of soil tends to dry out and blow away in events of high wind. And so there are a lot of beautiful, aesthetically pleasing perennial, ground covers that you can plant and will live season after season. But there's also some really beautiful annual ground covers that I'm sure everyone has seen driving around, the mustard seed that's in between the rows of vineyards. And that's something that you would then cut down, and once it's done blooming, and then you would plant again. So you have various different options that you could go for. I'm curious, if you're looking at an area that's closer to your home, you might want to have a little more diversity of ground covers that you can play with. But if you're looking at areas that are a little further from your home, you might want lower maintenance, where you can just throw some seeds and have ground cover that doesn't require quite as much care.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And you can also, once you have that living mulch down, that is going to, that will decompose over time and improve your soil quality and just make it easier and more receptive for various different plants to grow in the future. So I hope that helps that question.
Yeah, very, very good. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, if I want to plant a bush in my yard after the sheet mulching, then do I just punch a hole through the 3 inches of mulch and the cardboard and the 1 inch of mulch until I get down to soil?
Yeah, great, thanks. I'm glad you asked about planting. So we recommend sheet mulching and then letting that sheet mulch landscape sit for a while so that the cardboard can decompose and can really activate the bacteria in the soil, and you can have a really nice, rich soil to plant into. So we recommend letting it sit for sheet mulching in the fall is a great time, and then planting in the spring. And then you would just dust aside the mulch, cut an X in the cardboard, peel it back, and then plant into the soil.
Which is much easier to do once it's been sitting all winter through the rain than it is right after you install it and that cardboard's still super rigid. It's not impossible though.
We have definitely sheet mulched and then planted in one day, and it works as well. Really, the benefits of sheet mulching are noticeable in your landscape within weeks. You'll see increased earthworm activity, and you'll really start, it's actually so cool. It's the highlight of my last week. I was digging in an area in my landscape that I had sheet mulched a while ago and put some cardboard down. As I lifted it up, I saw this white network of mycelium. So that's all of the fungal activity in the soil that these little fungi emit, kind of like a glue that helps keep your soil together. And that white roots, the hyphae of the microbacteria, I could see it all just forming together. And I knew that my soil great things had been happening in my soil. So you'll start to see those benefits really quickly. And so it's okay to sheet mulch and plant right away. It's just even that much better if you let it sit a while. And when you're planting shrubs, or any plant really, you actually want to elevate it a little bit so that you'll have it maybe a half an inch to an inch above that soil level. And that's because the earth kind of settles over time. And you want to make sure that you're not burying the stem of whatever plant that you're planting, because burying the stem could lead to rot.
And I know Annie said this earlier too, but especially if you're in an area that has a lot of weeds, you really want to let that sheet mulch sit for a season, because anytime you're making a hole to put a plant in, that's a hole, that's opportunity for those weeds to come back and take over again.
Okay. I get to pay for my materials. Does your website have some places where I can find cardboard and mulch and all that good stuff?
We will send you some resources in the follow-up email that can point to a couple of places that we have used regularly.
Great.
Yeah, such as Grab and Grow is a big one that we use.
About maybe situations kind of like the hillside, maybe where you wouldn't recommend mulching, and kind of related to that, I'm thinking Bermuda grass, so much fun. How long, will it eventually work on Bermuda grass? Is it just a matter of time, or is something more needed?
That is also a really great question. So for Bermuda grass, is one of the most tenacious plants that I have ever come into contact with. And I have a lot of admiration for its ability to proliferate and thrive despite your best efforts to eradicate it. It is really tough. And so we recommend before you sheet mulch when you have Bermuda grass or padgrass, that you take extra efforts to get rid of it. So one thing that we have done at the Petaluma Library, in the back of the library, the front has a gorgeous garden that UC Master Gardeners developed, and the back has a garden that Daliacs developed. And that site had a lot of Bermuda grass. So what we ended up doing is scraping, where we actually removed the top, I believe it was 6 to 9 inches of soil, which is kind of sad to have to remove all that wonderful topsoil, but it helped us eradicate some of the Bermuda grass roots. And then we Serena, do you remember if we solarized on top of that?
We definitely solarized for the summer.
Okay, and then we
solarization steps.
And solarization is a process of spreading clear UV treated plastic over the site during the hottest months and securing really well the edges, because just a little bit of wind can pick up a big sheet of plastic. And when the wind blows it around, it tends to perforate in spaces, and then it's less effective. So really hold down that clear UV treated plastic. Make sure it is UV treated. We once did it when it wasn't UV treated, and the sun just disintegrated the plastic so quickly, and then we were dealing with plastic shreds everywhere in the landscape, which was less than ideal. And then so you do that during the hottest months, and what that does is raises the temperatures to about 190 degrees Fahrenheit, which kills off any kind of weed seeds that are in the top few inches of the soil and kills off the Bermuda grass in the top few inches of the soil. Unfortunately, Bermuda grass roots, again, what an amazing plant, can sink down up to 18 inches. And so solarization does not really address the roots that are 18 inches deep, but it does do a lot for helping get rid of the Bermuda grass. And it makes management a lot easier because you've really knocked it back. And then when you sheet mulch, any plant that grows through that cardboard layer, its root system just seems to come up so much easier. So then you're able to manually pull up Bermuda grass as it arises. So it'll give you a huge head start, but then you'll also have to do ongoing maintenance. Unfortunately, with sheet mulching, it's a really great way of suppressing a lot of weeds and being able to create a climate where your plants can then outcompete the weeds, but it's not perfect. But nothing is perfect. I want to mention too that landscape fabric is not perfect either. And landscape fabric is really detrimental to the soil and soil health. So,
and water health too. I was just talking about pollution prevention, landscape fabric. Every time there's like a rain event, those little pieces of microplastic that are breaking apart slowly wash down the storm drains into the watershed. So,
yeah, and we found that over time, sheet mulching is just as effective as landscape fabric in preventing weed growth.
Oh, one more. You made me think of this really quick too. If you're going to be hand removing Bermuda grass, make sure to put it in the trash and not in the green bin.
Yeah. Yeah, as with any invasive plant, put it in the trash, not the green bin.
I'll start a whole new population in your green bin.
And Jeanette, there was a second part to that question too, right?
Well, I guess I was just wondering, besides like a really steep slope, what are some other environments in which you would recommend other kinds of mulching or other approaches? Like, so we have pasture here, and the pasture's just wild. And so it's got its own cover crops going on, which I would like to amend with more biodiversity. And once it becomes, I think it has been grazed at times, probably over the years. So it's not that diverse right now. It doesn't seem to be, as far as the plants I can see.
Yeah.
But there's another area where I think my dad used to spray this area. It's just, you can look at it and just tell it's very depleted soil. It's just weeds and bare dirt. I mean, it's like the worst case scenario. And there's Bermuda grass. So I know that if I add better plants to it, that it will suppress the weeds to some degree. But so if we're talking about lawn before for mulching, I'm thinking, okay, what about, your dead bare dirt scenario, the other scenario? Is it good to start with the sheet mulching? Is that what you would recommend for like kind of a dead area?
Yeah, definitely. I would recommend trying to get rid of as much Bermuda grass as you can before, and then sheet mulch, because that sheet mulching process will help bring life back to the soil and then start to break up. If you have really compacted soil too, like a lot of us living in Sonoma County have clay soil.
It's clay, yeah.
So what you can do is you can get a broad fork, or any kind of a pitchfork will do. Anything to help you loosen up that soil. So you'll actually I think the broad forks are really fun because you can just stick it in, you can step on it, you're gonna rock it back and forth in a way that doesn't turn over the soil, but just helps break up the soil a little bit. And that will just loosens the soil and allows for roots to penetrate more easily, more oxygen flow into the soil, and will help that soil develop more life faster. And so I'd recommend doing that before you sheet mulch. Get rid of as much of the Bermuda grass or other invasives as you can, and then sheet mulch. And if you have the luxury of letting it sit for a little bit, let it sit over the rainy season, and then start to think about your plants. But I think that sheet mulching is a really great tool for areas that have been depleted or just kind of bare soil and whatever invasives happen to be growing in that environment.
Another question I just thought of, you mentioned the arbor mulch, which sounds great. But I do have some kind of mulch materials already available here on the property, just from nobody cleaning it up for so many years. I've got oak tree droppings.
Yeah.
Really thick. And I've also got redwood droppings. And I was thinking about mixing them and making that a mulch, but we have a friend of ours that's a master gardener, and we had a tree taken down and ground up. And I was thinking, cool, more mulch. And she just mentioned in passing, oh, by the way, the leaves are fine, but the tree itself will take nitrogen from the soil. And I was like, oh. So I thought I need to learn a little bit more about the different types of mulch.
So the bark will take nitrogen from the soil if it's mixed into the soil, because it binds up nutrients as it decomposes. But if you use it as a top dressing, it won't take nitrogen from the soil.
That's great. Okay, good.
And that's one of the reasons why you want, when you're planting, as Chuck asked, like, how do you figure out how to plant in your sheet mulched environment? You do want to keep as much mulch out of your planting hole as you can, so that you don't then have those large chunks that have to decompose alongside your roots.
Okay, thank you. That helps a lot.
Yeah, you're welcome. And after planting, always water in your plants. Watering in your plants helps settle the soil and close any kind of air gaps or pockets that might have occurred when you were planting. If you think about it, roots are seeking out nutrients in the soil, they hit an air gap, and then they dry out. Oh, and then one other thing about where you shouldn't mulch. So as we've experienced in the last 3+ years, catastrophic fires year after year after year. And the best practices for landscaping have evolved with these catastrophic fires. And at this point, there's a 0 to 5 zone. 0 to 5, it's called zone 0, but it's that 0 to 5 feet away from your house. And it's now recommended that you don't have mulch in that 0 to 5 foot zone, and that you then have something that's semi-permeable, like decomposed granite or rock, or pavers can be an option. You can also use cement, but it's nice to have something that's semi-permeable that lets water be able to absorb into the soil as well. And that's really like our knowledge of the best fire safer practices are evolving as the fire patterns are evolving. In 2017, nobody thought that fires would jump the freeway and burn urban Santa Rosa. And that was mostly because of embers that were flying. And so the idea is that you're going to have the least receptive ember bed next to your home. So you're really trying to reduce that. But then 5 feet away from your home, you can then start with mulch. And one thing to think about in terms of fire prevention is that a really well hydrated landscape is going to be less of a receptive fire bed. And so if you have soils that are well saturated because they've been covered with mulch, they will be more resilient. And if you have plants that are well watered and you've maintained those plants in a way over time that you don't have as much dead and dry material, then your landscape will be more resilient as well. And we do have had past webinars on how to firescape your landscape effectively, and we will continue to have webinars on care and maintenance, because that's just such a huge topic that's really affected us all in one way or another, and looks like it will continue to affect us over time.
So is there no recommendation right now about certain mulch types being more flammable than others? Is it just kind of this relation to the house?
There is. So gorilla hair, or the shredded redwood mulch, is considered to be really flammable. If you think about it, it's dry and has a lot of surface area. Arbor mulch is actually less flammable because it is partially composted. And in general, like the larger size mulch is going to be less flammable. But at this point, I don't know of any landscaper that would recommend having that shredded redwood mulch anywhere near your home.
I have one more question. So I know in terms of mulch, leaves are good, but I have these like 4 giant oak trees that just dump all of their leaves, and they kind of seem sort of toxic to plants. So are those considered good mulch, or should I get those swept up and tossed in the green can?
Oak leaves are okay to use as mulch. One problem if they fall in too heavy of a layer over your landscape is that they can block light for your plant, or they can cover that growth crown of your plant and deprive it of the light and airflow that it needs to thrive. And so we've actually seen that at one of our landscapes where the oak leaves would basically cover up the plants and be an issue for their survival. So if you have really heavy oak leaf litter, you might want to make sure that it's cleared away from your plants and provide a little bit of a perimeter for them to be able to have good air circulation and make sure that they're not covering the crown of the plant.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And it can also be hard if you're seeding, because you're seeding into mulch instead of seeding into soil. So you definitely want to clear those away so that you can actually be planting your seeds into soil.
I had been concerned about redwood initially because I guess I was thinking of pine needles, and I was thinking of redwood had something that would inhibit growth, like you see, like plants won't grow under certain areas. But I was told that that was pine needles and not redwood, and so I was leaning towards mixing the oak and the redwood to use in this bare area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that should be okay. I don't think it has any kind of growth suppressor in it. It is pretty cool how some plants can make the area around them toxic. Like, nope, you're not growing. All the resources here.
Actually, apparently, I'm just looking this up really quick, but redwood mulch apparently is natural insect repelling and rot resistant qualities. So it resists termite and ant infestations and lasts a lot longer than other wood mulches. Fun fact.
If you're going for redwood, get bigger pieces.
Okay.
And as far as mulches go, arbor mulch is pretty inexpensive. It's about 10 yards or $10 per yard. And the other types of mulches are considerably more expensive. And you can just check out various different, we'll send you some places that are great bulk providers of mulch, but arbor mulch is by far the cheapest. And some people in the past have brought up questions like, if you're going to be sourcing your own cardboard, is the ink toxic? And there are some colors of ink that are toxic, but we haven't had any issues with that as we've used recycled cardboard. I believe that black ink and I think red ink might not be great, but other inks are usually soy-based, and so shouldn't be an issue for you. But if you're really concerned, you can do a little research about what different colors what you'd be concerned about is that they use metals in their pigment, and that those metals might not be something that you'd want in your soil. And if you're using it for food gardening, I would be more diligent about researching. But if you're using it in a native landscape type situation, the level of metals that you'd be adding into your native landscape would not be very big. So I would feel okay with using recycled cardboard. Aha. All right, anything else?
Unmute myself, that helps. I just have a real basic question. When you're planting, just in general, when you're putting a plant in and you're creating maybe just like a little berm around the drip line, I guess, or something like that, do you want to mulch a little inside underneath just so that it isn't bare dirt? I know what you're saying, not covering too much of the trunk, but. What's best practice?
It kind of depends on the size of the shrub that you're planting, but basically you want to make sure that there's good circulation around the stem. So I would keep a couple inches around it clear. You don't have to keep the entire drip line clear, especially if you're planting maybe a 5-foot shrub. Just make sure that the stem has good air circulation. So good practice is to make sure that nothing is directly up against it.
Okay, thank you.
And one other consideration for mulch and mulch kind of blowing away is that mulch that is more hydrated is going to stay put too. So if you do have a little bit of a slope and you're noticing that your mulch is blowing away, you kind of tinker with your irrigation system. And Serena is far more knowledgeable than I am about irrigation. So if you have any irrigation questions, Serena's a great person to ask while she's here.
We just have fields with nothing, so we don't have no irrigation right now.
You're off the hook, Serena. It can always be hard when somebody asks very specific and individualized questions about irrigation. So I'm glad Serena was here to be able to field those in case you do have any.
Are you planning on getting some irrigation out there at all?
The back pasture, we haven't talked about it yet at all. The front pasture used to have one, and I don't know, it's not working now, and I don't know why. And when the fires were here and it was coming down the backside of Annandale and in 17, and they're looking at it, I'm like, did you guys turn the sprinklers on? And they're like, oh, it doesn't work. I'm like, might want it to work on that side, because that's usually the way the wind's blowing in a fire event. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know about the back. I don't know that we necessarily need it, especially if I can over time get in more native plants and things that are naturally drought resistant and more. It's hard to find something I've found that is drought resistant, fire resistant, deer resistant, and gopher resistant. I don't know if such a thing exists.
So I was just actually reading about Maximilian sunflowers, and they are one of the few perennial sunflowers, and they're deer resistant. They have these little hairs on their stems the deer really don't appreciate. And they're really beautiful. They're low water use. Not sure about gopher resistant because they do have a pretty hardy root system, and they will seed themselves over their perennial. So the plant that you planted will survive, but they'll also seed over time. And so you'll have a little bit of an expansion of the Maximilian sunflowers that you're using there. As far as fire resistant goes, Cal Fire, I believe, or was it Fire Safe Marin, has some plants that they recommend, but really as there's been time to witness burn patterns through landscapes, it's really more about your maintenance than about individual plant selection. Because a plant that's considered to be fire safe, if it really is dry and it has a lot of leaf litter that's caught up in it or dead material, that's going to still be a really flammable plant. And conversely, if you have a plant that might be considered not as fire safe, but you really maintain it well, then that plant will actually be more resilient to embers falling. So although there are best practices and guidance, I think the conversation has shifted more over time towards maintenance practices of your plants.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so I guess I'll ask the question, unless one of the guys is going to jump in here. I'll ask another question. If we wanted to add an irrigation system to this is a pasture, it's long and skinny, and it's on a slope. It's, I don't know, maybe 25-degree slope. I'm just kind of guessing. Are there certain systems that you would exclude right away?
I mean, I think the key with most slopes, especially if you're dealing with, like, hopefully at this point you'll have sheet mulch and your soil quality will be a little bit better and a little like, cause, you know, clay water's just going to run straight off of it. But I think you would definitely want to use a drip irrigation system. But not only that, like the way you time your water being delivered is really important here. So you would want to have your water, like there's a certain number of minutes that you have to get the water requirement for your plants, right? But that minute requirement to deliver that certain amount of water can be split up over like multiple time periods. So instead of like, say, normally you would run your irrigation system for 45 minutes, 3 days a week, like maybe you're running it for like 10 minutes and then like an hour off, and then like another 10 minutes, like an hour off, another 10 minutes and an hour off. So that way you're giving that water a chance to like settle into the soil instead of just run off down the slope. When I was still in school, we visited the Dodger Stadium in LA. I actually took a couple classes in irrigation when I was in school, go figure. But we visited the Dodger Stadium in LA, and they had an irrigation installation installed on a pretty steep slope and had mulch on it too. And what they didn't do right was they didn't do that where they did it in like short time segments. They just had it running for like 45 minutes. And what ended up happening was like during a game, so there was people in the stadium, it ended up kind of being like a landslide. Like the whole thing just came like down because of all the water that had collected on there. And it created this sort of like waterfall. So that's what you don't want to happen. And that could be prevented by running it in shorter time periods.
That's a good idea.
Other thing about a slope is just to make sure that you have pressure compensating emitters so that you don't end up having all the water emitting in the first part, and then as you go up the slope, having less water available.
Yeah, and if you have inline emitters, they come pressure regulated only, so.
I'm surprised at drip, because I guess I'm just picturing like right now it's pasture and it's grass, right? It's like native grass or whatever. I don't even know if it's native, actually. I take that back. I have no idea what it is, but tall grass. And so not that we're keeping that. I mean, I want to put in more like coyote bush and, you know, plants like that. So there would be individual plants that are getting watered. But I guess I'm picturing like what goes in between those or what goes all around those. How does that work for drip?
Yeah, so when we do drip installations and you have like, say you have a long stretch of land that doesn't have any plants in it, and you don't necessarily want to be delivering water to those areas, because that's also like an invitation for weeds, right? There's water and there's nothing growing there, so the weeds are going to take over. Thanks, Brian. You know, what we do is we install a blank irrigation line in between. So there's a couple different ways to install a drip irrigation system. One of them is to have blank line and just punch in emitters wherever you have plants. And that's the case where you would want to make sure you're buying specifically pressure regulated emitters, because there's tons of different types. But another way, which we actually prefer recently, is you can get a drip line that already has the emitters punched into it at certain distances, and that's inline emitters. So if you were using inline and you had like a long stretch with no plants, you could just cut the inline and, you know, like couple it to a blank piece for whatever runs that don't have any plants growing. But another nice thing about using, like, spray is not a bad way to water plants either. Like, there are a lot of California native plants that do enjoy being like misted off and showered off to get rid of some of that dust, and it helps them, you know, grow bigger and be healthy too. But another nice thing about drip is it's like more localized water delivery. So if you are in an area that has a lot of weeds and you're not trying to put water where you don't want plants to grow, it could be a nice way of trying to control your water a little bit more.
It's a hard mental shift to picture what it is now, which is the main, not the dead area I was talking about, but the main part of the pasture is just absolutely every square inch of it is covered with something is growing there, to picturing it more intentionally grown where there is a bush. And I don't know what might grow under the bush, but I'd be watering that plant in particular, and then not worried about every square inch being a new plant like it is, or grass like it is now.
In that case, it might be easier for you to just punch in your emitters. And that would allow you to have this blank tubing, and then you put an emitter next to the plant that you're wanting to provide water for.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably a 10-year project. So I have to really kind of think through the design before I invest in water. But even if I want to plant one, the lazy way I've kind of done it so far is to plant something right before the rainy season, and then let it kind of get established on its own.
Yeah.
But then the first summer comes. Well, yeah, but then the first summer comes and it needs some help. And so I have to figure out, I tend to be like, oh, I'll just hand water. And it's like, well, that's going to get impossible at some point. Yeah,
most natives, that even if they are really drought resilient, they do need a couple of years of more water to get established. And then once they're 2 to 3 years old, they should be able to survive without any additional water. We've just been seeing such hot, dry winters though. Like this winter, we had so little rainfall, and we had pretty high temperatures. Last winter, we had turned off all of our irrigation systems because it used to be best practice to turn off your irrigation system in November, Serena?
Yeah, November through like April, I think it was, or like March, we used to turn off all our irrigation systems. But
we just had hot temperatures and dry winds, and we noticed that our plants were really failing. And so you really can't count on that heavy rainfall winter as much anymore. So I'm curious to see how those native plants, if they really will be able to take the 2 to 3 years established and then not need additional water as we're experiencing really unpredictable weather patterns.
Yeah, you're right. I did a lavender in this dead area. There's 2 fig trees, and I'm like, let's start lavender, because I had good luck with that when I used to live in Novato, being very tolerant. I didn't have to hardly do it, and it just took off and got big. So I thought, let's do that. I know Matanzas Creek down the road does great with lavender. And I put one in, and I watered it a little when I first planted it, maybe, I don't know, October, November. And then I haven't done much since, and it looks a little dry, and so I've had to start hand watering it already.
Yeah, it's really unpredictable.
Yeah, it's not the best system. I have to come up with a plan.
Something's gonna happen, and your plants are gonna crisp up.
Yeah,
which is the nice thing about installing a drip system, you know, is you have something that's just going to do the watering for you, and you don't even have to think about it.
Right. The one problem I've had with drip is, well, 2 things. One is it's great when you first put it in, and then sometimes it's hard to figure out what's going on with it and where the break is, or what's if something's been not covered and it's in the sun. But the thing I find myself most resistant to drip for is it's so hard on the fingers getting things in. And I'm like, can they design this better so that it's easier to put together? I mean, there's no other way, right? It's got to be that tight, huh? I find that really challenging on my fingers.
We've started splurging on spin lock couplers. And so we're using usually 1/2-inch line. And you have, like, they're threaded, and so you are going to be pushing them in and then spinning them shut. Otherwise, you do have to just like jam these components in. We were installing irrigation in the wintertime and had to have a thermos of hot water so that we could make this pipe more flexible to try and stuff it. It was horrible, and it was really hurt your fingers over time. So spend a little extra money and get the spin lock fittings. I think they're usually about 50 cents per fitting versus, I want to say, maybe 25 to 30 cents for the other.
Like
that is worth
something per fitting. Aren't they like $1 something per fitting? I think they're like $1.50.
All right, well, they can be pricier, but they'll really save your hands over time.
Yeah, well, my mom and I get tired of asking one of the guys here, I'm just like, but like you said, either it's too stiff, or it's gotten hard from being old, or I'm tired because I've done 20 of them already.
Yeah.
But that's good to know that exists, because that might be worth it in certain areas.
To prevent your line from like crisping up in the sun too, when you're talking about that 3 inches of mulch, you know, like you definitely want to like cover the line with a little layer of mulch to prevent it from frying out in the sun too. That helps a lot. Because yeah, they do get really crispy in the sun, and they just kind of like snap.
Talk about plastic degradation, right?
Yeah. I know.
We're redoing these garden beds here that have, I don't know, they're 20 something years old, and I cannot tell you how many bits of plastic I am pulling out of there. And I'm just, you know, and they're tiny pieces, but I just keep thinking all the micro pieces coming off of that are in the, you know, gazillions. Yeah, it's bad.
Like when I see landscape fabric, like I get why you thought it would be a good idea. Like I get it, but it's really so hard it decomposes, and then it ends up in our soils, and then that ends up in our creeks and ends up in the ocean, and it really is a pollutant, and it's also an irritant too. Like if you ever want to redo your garden, you don't want to spend time fishing out tiny little pieces of fabric.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we don't have a better solution for irrigation right now. You know, all we have is plastic as an option for delivering water to our plants. But if you install your irrigation system like really right the first time around, and you know, like you get the right pieces and you connect them really well, and you like cover it with a little mulch, and you're not like walking all over it all the time, like it really can last a long time and work really well too. I think the hardest part is just getting it installed correctly.
Right. No, and thinking through the design and then remembering where the lines are.
Yeah, drawing out a map is
Good map.
so amazing. It's like you would be surprised at how short of a time it takes to forget where your lines are.
That's so true.
Almost instantly, really, as soon as they're covered.
Yeah, I look forward to your resource list because I think I'm going to be utilizing all of them.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Yeah, thank you. You guys are wonderful. Daily Axe is amazing.
Oh, thanks so much. And stay tuned for future webinars. We are going to be really taking on those maintenance practices more and more, and we'll also be addressing design. We periodically, I think this, actually the whole virtual thing means that we're able to archive our resources and display them. But right before the pandemic, we had a series on design that talked you through the whole step of creating a base map and then conceiving of how you want to organize your space and the actual installation. And so we'll have those kind of in cycles. So stay tuned for more design installation type workshops and other fun workshops that we might be able to start holding in person in the next few months.
That'd be great. I went to one in October that was wonderful, and that was actually in person about soil. So yeah, I look forward to that.
Yeah, wonderful. All right.
Yeah, thank you both.
Joining us. We really appreciate all of your questions and curiosity about the subject.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.